Jacques Dubois sent 16 French resistance fighters to kill Bumpy Johnson. Only 4 walked out, and the message they delivered made the most feared Vichy collaborator in New York abandon his empire and flee to Montreal forever. August 25, 1944. Bumpy Johnson was outnumbered, 16 to 1. Jacques Dubois had sent his deadliest crew, Marcel the Shadow, Pierre the Wolf, Henri the Silent, Marie the Ghost, 12 more French Maquis veterans, whose names were whispered in fear from Lyon to Brooklyn. They cornered Bumpy in the Savoy ballroom basement. No witnesses, no way out. Bumpy was 39 years old, established king of Harlem, but facing battle-hardened resistance fighters. Dubois was the most connected French commander in New York. Everyone expected the same ending. Bumpy Johnson dead in a basement. But what Dubois didn't know, Bumpy Johnson understood liberation better than most French. 5 hours later, only 4 of those 16 fighters walked out alive, and they delivered a message that made Jacques Dubois abandon his territory and disappear forever. This is the story of the night. Bumpy Johnson reminded French fighters what they really fought for. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand Jacques Dubois. He was a former French army officer who'd fled France in 1940 when the Nazis invaded. But unlike other French refugees who joined the Free French, Dubois had made different choices. He'd established connections with Vichy officials, collaborated with German business interests, and built a criminal empire in New York's French Quarter. By August 1944, Dubois controlled the Lower East Side's French community with an iron fist. His fighters weren't typical gangsters. They were French Maquis, who'd become disillusioned with de Gaulle's leadership, who'd followed Dubois to America seeking profit instead of principle. But there was a problem. Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy had been helping French Jewish refugees since 1943, providing safe houses, protection from anti-Semitic attacks, and assistance in avoiding deportation back to Vichy France. To Dubois, this wasn't charity. This was interference with his business arrangements. He'd been selling information about Jewish refugees to Vichy agents in exchange for money. March 1944. Dubois sent emissaries to Bumpy. The message was clear. Stop protecting French Jews or face the consequences of crossing French resistance fighters. Bumpy sent back a response that made Dubois' blood boil. Tell Jacques that real resistance fighters protect all refugees. April 1944. Dubois tried intimidation. He convinced French dock workers to refuse shipments to businesses under Bumpy's protection. He pressured French restaurant owners to ban Jewish customers. He spread rumors that Bumpy was working with German agents. Bumpy responded by opening a memorial center for French resistance heroes. Free food, housing assistance, and protection for all French refugees. In the heart of Dubois' territory. In May 1944, Dubois escalated. He sent 8 fighters to destroy the memorial center. They came back unconscious, tied up, and left at a synagogue with a note. Real resistance fighters honor their dead. They don't dishonor them. By August 1944, Dubois was getting pressure from Vichy contacts. His inability to control the Harlem problem was making French collaborators look weak, and with Paris being liberated, his connections to the losing side were becoming dangerous. So Dubois made a decision that would end his criminal career. He assembled 16 of his most battle-tested veterans, men and women who'd survived German occupation, who'd fought SS troops in the forests of France, who'd killed collaborators, and would kill for French honor. The plan was simple. Corner Bumpy Johnson on Liberation Day. Execute him brutally. Send a message that protecting Jews from French business interests had consequences. August 24, 1944. The 16 fighters gathered at Dubois' safe house. These weren't street criminals. Marcel had killed 12 German officers with explosives. Pierre had led sabotage operations against Nazi supply lines. Marie had survived Gestapo torture without breaking. They were heroes who'd lost their way. Dubois briefed them personally. Bumpy Johnson has interfered with French operations for the last time. He must be eliminated completely. What are his crimes against France? Asked Henri the Silent. He protects Jewish refugees, who should be returned to proper French authorities. He interferes with legitimate French business arrangements. The fighters accepted their mission. They'd been following Dubois since arriving in America. They trusted his leadership completely. August 25th, 1944, 11:45 p.m. Liberation Day in Paris, Occupation Day in Harlem. 16 French fighters moved through the Lower East Side, like ghosts. They disabled security, cut communications, positioned themselves with military precision around the Savoy ballroom. Marcel picked the lock using skills learned breaking into German headquarters. The 16 fighters descended the stairs in perfect silence. Professional resistance veterans, executing a military operation. They found Bumpy sitting alone, reading a French newspaper, drinking wine. He looked up as they formed a semicircle around him. 16 weapons pointed at his head. Jacques Dubois sends his regards, Marcel announced, his French accent thick with authority. Bumpy set down his newspaper slowly. He looked around the semicircle of fighters, studying their faces carefully. Then he spoke in perfect French. "Seize combatants pour tuer un homme," Bumpy said. 16 fighters to kill one man. The fighters froze. Bumpy Johnson speaking French was impossible. But what he said next changed everything. "Et c'est que voulait Jean Moulin," Bumpy continued. "Is this what Jean Moulin wanted?" Marcel lowered his weapon slightly. "How do you know about Moulin?" "Je connais l'histoire de la résistance française," Bumpy replied. "I know the history of the French resistance, because I understand fighting against impossible odds." Pierre stepped forward. "You dare speak our hero's name?" "I speak about resistance, because I am a resistance fighter," Bumpy said, standing slowly. "You fought the Nazis to liberate France. I fight oppression to protect my community. We're fighting the same war." Marie was confused. "But you're interfering with French operations." "I'm protecting Jewish refugees from the same collaboration that destroyed France," Bumpy corrected. "The same people who worked with the Nazis are the ones Dubois serves now." Bumpy reached into his jacket. 16 weapons aimed at him, but he moved slowly, carefully. He pulled out a small object and placed it on the table. It was a French resistance armband, worn and faded, with the cross of Lorraine and the word Liberté. "A friend gave me this in Alcatraz," Bumpy said quietly. "French resistance fighter named Claude Arnoux, fought with Jean Moulin before being captured. Died in prison rather than betray his principles." Marcel stared at the armband. "Claude Arnoux, you knew him?" "He was my cell commander in Lyon. Taught me everything about fighting for freedom." "He taught me something too," Bumpy said. "He taught me that resistance fighters protect all victims of oppression, not just their own people." The basement went completely silent. 16 French veterans suddenly questioning everything they thought they knew. "What are you saying?" Pierre asked. "I'm saying Jacques Dubois isn't fighting for French liberation. He's collaborating with the same forces you spent 4 years fighting." Henri spoke for the first time in months. "But Dubois led us here." "Dubois led you away from your principles," Bumpy replied. "You're not fighting for France anymore. You're fighting for the people who sold France to the Nazis." Marie looked around at her comrades, professional fighters but also French patriots raised on stories of resistance and liberation. "What proof do you have?" Marie asked. Bumpy gestured to the resistance armband. "Look at what's sewn beneath the cross of Lorraine." Marcel examined the armband carefully. Sewn in small letters were the words "Morte aux collaborateurs," death to collaborators. Claude believed that French liberation meant freedom for everyone oppressed by fascism. Bumpy continued. "Not just freedom for France, but freedom from collaboration everywhere." For the next 3 hours, 16 French fighters listened as Bumpy explained how collaboration had followed them to America, how Dubois was working with the same Vichy officials who'd betrayed France, how fighting Bumpy meant protecting the people who'd sold their country to the Nazis. "He's right," Pierre said quietly. "We've become what we fought against in France." Marcel studied the resistance armband. "What do you propose we do?" "Take this armband back to Dubois. Tell him it came from Claude Arnoux' student. Tell him that French resistance fighters don't work for collaborators." One by one, The 16 fighters filed back up the basement stairs, but not all of them. 12 men and women left the Savoy ballroom that night. 4 stayed behind. Why? Bumpy asked. Because you reminded us what we liberated France for, Marcel replied. The next morning, Marcel the Shadow walked into Dubois's safe house and placed the French resistance armband on his table. Where is Bumpy Johnson? Dubois demanded. Alive. What do you mean alive? I sent 16 fighters. Marcel's voice carried the authority of the French resistance. You sent 16 freedom fighters to protect collaboration. We remembered what we really stand for. Dubois stood up, his face red with rage. How dare you question my leadership? How dare you betray the resistance? Marcel replied. Bumpy Johnson understands French liberation better than you do. The room went dead silent. Dubois' other associates watched as Marcel delivered the message that would end their leader's criminal empire. Claude Arnoux died fighting collaborators. You've become one. We won't be part of it. And if I contact my Vichy connections? Marcel looked around the room at Dubois' remaining supporters, men and women who'd heard about the resistance armband, who understood what it meant. Then you'll discover that some French fighters remember what we really liberated France from. 3 days later, Jacques Dubois took a train to Montreal. He never returned to New York. The 4 fighters who stayed behind became trusted allies in Bumpy's organization. They helped establish French refugee assistance programs, anti-collaboration networks, and liberation celebration services. And that French resistance armband, Bumpy kept it in his office for the rest of his life. A reminder that liberation recognizes no borders and resistance fighters protect all victims of oppression. August 25, 1944. 16 fighters walked into a basement to serve collaboration. 12 walked out having remembered what liberation means. And the 4 who stayed proved that French courage meant fighting oppression, not serving it. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's showing them they're betraying everything they once fought for. If this story of liberation transcending borders moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you believe resistance fighters protect all oppressed peoples, and comment below, what would you have done in that basement?